Well, Joseph Harrison, thank you so much for joining us here at the Stockbridge Library's online poetry series. We started back last April as we were discussing, thinking we would do a 4-week poetry month series, and we're still going strong at the end of January. And we are delighted to have you with us today. This program was the brainchild of the president of our board of trustees, John Gillespie, who's also here with us today, and he'll be in conversation with our poet. And Joseph Harrison was born in Richmond, Virginia, and grew up in Virginia and Alabama, and schooled at Yale and Johns Hopkins. Sometimes I Dream That I Am Not Walt Whitman is his most recent book, his sixth book, published in March of 2020. His other publications include Someone Else's Name, Identity Theft, and Shakespeare's Horse. His poems have appeared in American Scholar, The New Criterion, the New York Review of Books, the Paris Review, Parnassus, and Raritan, and also in anthologies such as the Best American Poetry, the Library of America's American Religious Poems, and Norton's Leadership, Essential Writings from Our Greatest Thinkers. He has received a Guggenheim in Poetry and an Academy Award in Literature from the Academy of Arts and Letters. And so without any further ado, Joseph, I welcome you and thank you for joining us, and
Great
turn
to be
the
here.
program over to you and to John.
Yeah, Joseph, thanks again. So, 2020 there was so many dramatic themes. Obviously the pandemic, politics, racial injustice, economic inequality. And now I guess the coin has flipped where we have, rational press conferences by the press secretary, a president that goes to the podium pretty much every day, plans for the vaccine rollout. How or have these themes, shown up in your poetry?
Well, actually, they haven't at the moment because I haven't been writing much of late. I have a sort of cycle that I go through. I write poems, I get an idea how the poems are going to fit together in a book. I put the book together, I revise, then I publish the book and I go out and read the poems. And there's a break in between books for me where things sort of settle. Well, I published this book on March the 15th, 2 days before the lockdown. So my whole cycle got broken. So I'm just now starting to get back to trying to write a little bit, doing some translations and stuff. So all the stuff that happened, it hasn't really, some of it will show up in my work eventually, but yeah. I haven't been writing poems of late. So that's not a very good answer, but that's the only answer I have.
I think, we hear different things. I think part of it is a lot of people, in fact, the next question, really, it's the next question that I think will lead into this is, how does a poem begin for you? What would trigger it? We've heard, conversations, other poets, reading the newspaper. I guess there are a variety of different ways. Is there one way that kind of, triggers the writing part, or is it, it could be different every time, or what kind of gets you going?
Well, different things strike me as subjects for a poem. And sometimes it comes from reading, sometimes it comes from conversation, sometimes it just comes from things that I see or things that I hear. But usually I'll get an idea and I'll think, oh, I can make a poem out of that. But the idea may sit there for a while before I come around to writing the poem, and it can sit there for 2 months, it can sit there for 2 years, yeah. And then I get I sort of hear the start of it, and a line comes into my head that strikes me as a good way to start that poem, and then I'm off and running with it. But it's not a predictable process, and it is a little different for each poem.
Great. So I'm going to ask my last question in a minute. So, I read the interview you had with Catherine Hollander,
Yeah.
talking about the Walt Whitman, your latest book.
Mm-hmm.
I guess where you're going to use the right word. I'll just use my, channeling other poets for a variety of instances. So how did that, I think what I read is that you've been inspired by a lot of other poets and poems, and that's how it kind of.
Yeah, that's very much it's been a part of my work all along. I've always been interested in the relation between poems and the relation between poets. And so that's always informed my work. But in this book, it particularly came to the fore. And it was very much in the forefront of my mind that as this book got going, this book turned out to be more and more and more about that, more directly about that than previous books had.
So I'll ask a question that is always open-ended for poets. How do you know when a poem is finished, or is it ever finished?
Never finished, just abandoned.
That's what everyone says. That must be on the poet's job description card.
It is on the poet on the job description, but there is a point that one gets to where one knows that one can't do any more with it. And there are always things in any poem, sometimes just little things that aren't that one wishes one could be a little different or a little stronger. But at some point one gets to the point where one says, okay, I think I've done all I can with this one. And it's gonna have to remain in its state of imperfection while I move on to go someplace else. So it's
oh, really good. So why don't you, we look forward to having you read some of your work for us.
Yeah. I look forward to doing it, and I shall go ahead.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to start, sort of apropos your last question, with the first poem in Sometimes I Dream That I'm Not Walt Whitman, which is called River of Song. Who said that? Surfacing from sleep, seeing the curtains fringed with light, I hear a music fading. Whose? Part mine, part someone's. Cold and deep the word flow runs, and darkest night. The dead keep singing. They don't sleep. We wake, diminishing and right. I hear a music playing. Whose? On runs the river, dark and deep and cold as interstellar night. And that is, for me, where poems often do come from. They come from the river of song that runs in my mind all the time. Sometimes I know where it's coming from, and sometimes I don't. This one I know the next one I know where it came from, and I think the audience probably will know too. It's called Stopping. Whose woods these are we all know well, though tight-lipped most refuse to tell. Reluctant to assume the cost of any silly, childish spell to make such hidden things stay lost. No wind, no ice, no snow, no frost. No solid winter 6 feet deep, nor Easter swirled and bluster tossed, now blanketing the world asleep beneath the dark skies, starless sweep. None of that. Just my double take to find, at my age, I still keep making my typical mistake stopping beside this frozen lake when I have promises to break and miles to go before I wake. And here's another more general poem about where poems come from. At the end, I refer to the trope of the leaves, which is an ancient trope. It goes all the way back to Homer and Virgil and Dante, where falling leaves are compared to flocks of birds or compared to groups of men's souls. A pipistrelle is a kind of bat, and a bottlenose a kind of dolphin. This poem is called Echolocation. Just like the bottlenose or pipistrelle can map the world by sound with clicks and squeaks and high-pitched pings emitted to rebound through ocean or night air, enabling them to tell precisely where tasty or nasty things might swarm or swim or lurk in thick dark or in liquid murk, using cochlear adaptation as fine-tuned instrument for foraging and navigation in lieu of sight or scent. So this tries, as it sings both high and low, flicking in fricatives and whispering in sibilants, to bounce back off what gives a rising assonance to every rounded O, or resonance echoing those first chants, projecting songs to come, while fine-tuning the medium to double, treble, crest, and flow with sun, moon, morning star, like flocks of leaves, by which we know exactly where we are. And this is a more specifically haunted poem. Sometimes the ghosts are quite apparent. This poem I wrote after the death of my late friend Mark Strand. And I actually did have a dream that this poem was in part based on. And the poem is simply called Mark Strand. When I came to the end of the dream, there was Mark Strand. We were in a vast hall where the ceiling was too high to see, and the light slanted down from above, and a cold wind blew. We sat on a bench in the back. A little ways off, a teacher was teaching a class, and she asked him to speak, but he shook his head. He was too tired. Then he turned to me and he said, I don't write anymore. I don't even look at the moon, but I read. Then he smiled. When you read the books you most love for the last time, you see the great works of imagination get better and better. When you come to that passage where, arrayed in battalions, with all their flashing armor and flapping banners and bright wings fanning the starlight, the heavenly host throws down its spears. You wonder, although you've read it 100 times, will it really happen again? And when it does, you are surprised. There were tears in his eyes as he said this. But were they tears of sadness or tears of joy? Or were they just caused by the wind, that cold wind blowing and blowing? Then he was gone, and the teacher was gone with her class and the students' voices. And all I could hear in the hall was the sound of the wind. Now I think I'll do a little bit of the title sequence. These are short poems, and in each poem, the title forms the first line or part of the first line. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes I dream that I am not Walt Whitman. Sometimes I dream that I am not Walt Whitman, that I'm an engineer or an airplane pilot or a school teacher or a soldier or a traveling salesman, not a poet living his afterlife through his poems. I enjoy those dreams. I enjoy waking to find they were only dreams. Let them say whatever they want. Let them say whatever they want about me on the internet. I'm fine with it. I'm all for communication in an instant. I like the internet, but sometimes it makes me feel like an old man. Then I remember, I'm only 199. Returning to the seashore. Returning to the seashore after more than a century, I dally my feet in the waves as I did when a boy. I see the developments, the condominium, then I do not see them at all. Just the marsh grass and the cattails covering the dunes, the long, low clouds and the dark, rolling shroud of the sea. I hear it is charged against me. I hear it is charged against me that I have become an institution, a monument, a study, an industry, with biographers and bibliographers and editorial apparatuses. In my lifetime, I didn't much care about institutions, and now in my afterlife, I care even less. Whatever they say I am, you can be certain I'm not. Please desist with your commentaries and annotations, however well intended, for they are completely beside the point and always will be. Go walk in the fields and woods. Go walk by the sea at night and look up at the stars. See what I mean? Yes, now you see what I mean. Like a ghost, I returned. Like a ghost, I returned to my old house in Camden and tagged along with a tour group, listening to the guide recite details of my life there, some of them true. I saw, one more time, the room where I slept and wrote. They had my old pen on display. I could almost reach out and touch it. The room where I sat with guests. The kitchen where Mary cooked for me. The room where they laid out my corpse and 1,000 people filed past. Who would have thought I had so many friends and admirers? And what did they think they would see? It was just a corpse. The real me had moved on, living and breathing in poems. I am no staid collection of facts and artifacts. I am the waves and the seas of grass. I am the wind in the leaves. As you can tell, for me, poetry is often a kind of ventriloquy, as a summoning. And this next poem is about that. It gives 3 different versions in 3 short sections of ventriloquism. In the 3rd section, I use the phrase uncouth, unkissed, which is a quotation from the introduction to Spencer's Shepherd's Calendar, where E.K., who may or may not be a real person, says he's quoting Chaucer, though he's misquoting him. Uncouth means unknown, not crude, but you can take it as meaning crude if you wish. This is the compromised ventriloquist. Gastronomy, vibration in the gut, tuned to the presence of the dead, possessed the medium to utter what digested, triggered hope or dread in questioners, delighted or aghast at all they thought they finally knew. To tell the future or reveal the past was dangerous. The darkest clue doomed sacrificial youths and beasts. Dim ratings, guttural, abrupt, translated to hexameters by priests in versions polished and corrupt, proved riddles no less difficult to crack. The truth was rarely clear or kind. Cautious Lysander wound up stabbed in the back. Croesus conquered. Oedipus blind. What once was supernatural decree became, in time, a party trick crowds at the music halls would pay to see. The animated dumb sidekick, Charlie McCarthy, Sailor Jim, or Coster Joe, though just a cheeky, wise-ass puppet, would show his straight man up throughout the show, flip every quibble and one-up it. Oracular enshrinement, oh so past. Ventriloquy was entertainment. Magic was stagecraft. Voice, the artful cast. Nobody wondered what the strain meant. Nearing the scribbled end, he took the stage, the compromised ventriloquist. His bare-bones theater, the haunted page. Obscurity, uncouth, unkissed, held no protection from the talking dead. No charm or curse could exorcise the choir of sirens singing in his head, inspiring another exercise. His own distinctive style at last. Dream on. Some stuff he made up, sure. But then those ghostly demarcations would stream on, flooding his studio again to wash him up and out and down the drain. Too influential, they impressed, and he was pressed. But why complain about not being self-possessed? Conspiring to imprison him for years, through harmony and ornament, the arch conductors of the crystal spheres abused him as their instrument. Black magic? Maybe. Cheating? Well, that too. Who's talking? Uh-oh. Hold the phone. He was the dummy they kept speaking through in words that were and weren't his own. Translation is, I think, another form of ventriloquy in some ways. So I'll throw one of those in. I don't do much translation. I wouldn't even call this a translation. It's more like a version. But it's of a famous poem by Baudelaire. And the word cutty, a cutty is a pipe, a little corncob pipe that sailors sometimes smoke. This is the albatross. Often, to amuse themselves, the sailors seize what shadows their ship as it glides along its way. The albatross, high lord of the gulfs and seas, their indolent companion turned their prey. Hobbled on shipboard, baffled, the sky king's deposed. A joke his dignity abhors. Clumsy, ashamed, he feels his huge white wings drag at his sides, useless as unmanned oars. This soaring voyager, how awkward and weak, how comical, tormented by the crew. One torturer sticks a cutty in his beak. Limping, one mimics the cripple who once flew. The poet, like this rider of the skies, wandered the trade winds, laughing at earthbound things, but grounded where people hoot and criticize, can't walk, encumbered by his outsized wings. Not many people remember, much less read, the poet Algernon Charles Swinburne. But when Swinburne died in 1909, W.B. Yeats, never modest, wrote to a friend, "Now I am king of the cats." One doesn't think of Swinburne as having been king of the cats, but Yeats did, which might give us some pause. This is called The Forsaken Singer. When his music defined what the young folk wanted, when to sing so purely was risky and brave, and his drop-dead artistry, echo-haunted by concatenations of wind and wave, where the foam flower blooms and the sea mew hovers, made the high tide fill the most secreted nooks with studied perfection. True poetry lovers bought his books. He sang as if there were no tomorrows, as if past and present were one fluid tense, full of tacit longings and private sorrows, as if beauty were meaning and sound were sense. And all those who heard him were certain they knew why he sang as he sang, for a darkling change swept over the seascape to render their view rich and strange. But fashion, as fashioned, falls victim to time. The polished, percussive extremes of a style, swirling in arabesque rhythm and rhyme, for a while seem just right, but just for a while. What the past most admired, the future forecloses. When the sea winds rise and the sea pines sway, some things get, like summer's most delicate roses, blown away. Oh yes, he was king of the cats, whose fame seemed permanent, scripted by stars. But how many today remember his name? The world doesn't end, but we do forget. A singer falls silent 100 years. Rare bookstores vanish. Small libraries close. What happens to music when no one hears? No one knows. And just one more poem, this one in 5 short sections. The first 4 lines of this poem actually consists of Shakespeare's epigraph, which is in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford, where there's also a weird bust of him, quite odd looking, and the poem makes reference to that bust. The poem has an epigraph from Hamlet. That skull had a tongue in it and could sing once. And this is Shakespeare's Head. Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust and close it here. Blessed be ye man, it spares these stones, and cursed be he, it moves my bones. And cursed be sexton, parish clerk, or any man whose dirty work disturbs my poor dust where it lies. I'll see you, though through other eyes. The dead know how to set things right, ghosting in the corners of the night, to find and leave you cold in bed, your imperfections on your head. My blessing may do little good to those refraining, as they should. But if you thrive by doing ill, my curse will mark you, yes, it will. But how to reconcile the poet of such agony and lust, of worldliness, rhetorical bravura, and infinite variety of style and wit and sprezzatura, with this insipid bust of bluish Cotswold limestone set in its niche? A self-satisfied pork butcher, Dover Wilson, quill pen in hand, he looks thick-headed, ordinary, rich. Whole worlds at his command. The cloud-capped show was over. Fears of the charnel house, of disinterred confusion, ossuary mix and match. Who's knocked about the mazzard, chopless? Well, anyone. Without a word, poor luck finds out the hazard. Some clay, a hole to patch. Here lies, commemorate, like any other man, the matchless bard, like golden lads and girls, the final stage. Stay, passenger, regard the name, the date, trust to the living page, and pray. The rest is hard. All your precautions can't anticipate the odd macabre fads of future days. The burgeoning celebrity skull craze that led collectors to decapitate Beethoven, Haydn, Swift, Sir Thomas Browne, Geronimo, and Goya, and de Sade led someone to pry up your stone to find your rest. Excuse me, this is unusual for me. My apologies. I'll start this section again. All your precautions can't anticipate the odd macabre fads of future days. The burgeoning celebrity skull craze that led collectors to decapitate Beethoven, Haydn, Swift, Sir Thomas Browne, Geronimo, and Goya, and de Sade led someone to pry up your stone, then prod your resting spot to find you, 3 feet down, shrouded, not coffined, and detach their prize. Ground penetrating radar, GPR, discovers you're not where we think you are. At least your skull is not. To our surprise, an odd disturbance where your head should be. A strange brick structure. What's that doing there? Suggests an infiltration and repair. Custodians of Holy Trinity won't give permission for an excavation. With or without your head, they'll let you lie. Cue the hideous lines, the shriek owl cry, the sheeted dead of Gothic machination who squeak and gibber. Cue men all on fire, walking the streets like portents. Dews of blood, these late eclipses, winged of the rookie wood, burst cerements. Lights up, bare ruined choir. Curse or plead, it matters not. Greedy finds, so greedy takes, scripts the coda, all mistakes. Mutilation of the plot turns romance to tragic farce, mocks the poet's dying wish, serves his head as on a dish. Mystery will never pause, clueless, bootless as the dead. Property appalled, the self reams of paper on a shelf, beauty, truth, and all that fled. Harbinger come far too near, invitation in a curse. Hard now to imagine worse. Like the snows of yesteryear, constancy is for the birds. Greedy takes what greedy finds, casts it to the viewless winds. All's defunctive, blot these words. Foul deeds will rise. The heart with strings of steel will bow before the altar, flush with guilt. Confess your sins, though none will be forgiven, not heinous theft, nor murderous intent, nor profit from imaginary crime. A magpie's not a man, though black and white, blackness of heart, the white of cowardice, strutting in borrowed feathers, cap a pea. It's better to be vile and vile esteemed than not to be, however rank your crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, I stole Shakespeare's head. At some point in the past, I won't say how, strings pulled, palms greased, equipment commandeered, jumped at the dark shoaled middle of the night, I slipped past lime trees, found an open door. By candlelight, crowbarred his ledger stone, jabbed my right hand right through his threadbare shroud, fingered vermicular dust to find his skull, then gripped it through the eye sockets and took it. It's sitting on my desk, watching me now. Thank you.
Very nice. I know where you get your inspiration.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
It was a real delight to.
Joseph, I was on the treasurer and the board president of Historical Congressional Cemetery in the Southeast DC, bordering the jail. And I guess there are maybe 58,000 people buried underneath. And we did some GPR stuff. So you're right. We were finding stuff underground that, you know, it was like from past, you know, generations or civilizations or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
Hi there, Kathy. Thanks for joining us. So if there's questions, comments, discussion to engage in, the floor is open.
And I think Joseph, once again, you know, it's always good. I'm going to have to start reading the Tupelo Press, you know, get more or details about our poets. So I think you want to mention where we can buy your books. That was the last.
Oh, yes. Very much so. The Waywiser Press publishes my most recent books, and they can be bought online from the Waywiser Press or through our American distributor, SPD, which is small press distributors. I urge people, if possible, to either buy them from Waywiser or from SPD rather than from Amazon, because if they buy from Amazon, once Amazon has finished taking its cut, we really don't get anything at all. We get pennies for each book. So it's not where, you know, it's cheaper and easier in some ways through Amazon, but the Waywiser Press or SPD, small press distributors, on the Waywiser Press page.
There are 4 or 5 poets on SPD because I bought my daughter a bunch of the books from our poets that have read Christmas, and the SPD. It took a while to get there. You know, I thought, oh, it's not that. I ordered it like 3 weeks. You know, you're so used to like next day, same. You know, but no, it arrived just in time for me to, you know, push it onward in its journey.
Yeah, they're operating at reduced capacity right now, SPD. If you order it from England, it's a one-man band and he gets it in the mail quickly. So actually, you'd probably get it faster from England at this point than you would from San Francisco, where SPD is.
Crazy world we're living in now.
It is a
that's for
crazy
sure.
world.
Yeah.
It is a crazy world.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Well, Joseph, thank you so very much for joining us. I will send along a link to this recording. And if there are no questions.
Any further questions?
Wendy, I have a silly question. I had trouble logging in today. It kept asking me for a passcode. I clicked on the link in the